Member for New Maryland Sunbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're coming up onto the anniversary of the failed snowplow contracts that were allowed to go to a company in Quebec by the Minister of Service New Brunswick. And the minister currently now, he's the minister of responsible for the Treasury Board. He had to come in and correct that mistake and change that. Mr. Speaker, after many questions in the legislature over time and in Crown corporations and public accounts, we've asked and asked and asked if this process, this review process, has been undertaken, and if it has it been successful for New Brunswick contractors and construction companies to protect their jobs right here in the province? So I'd like to ask the Premier today if he has an update on this and if it's being successful and being put in place to protect New Brunswickers.
The Honourable Minister of Department of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member opposite for the question. And obviously, we go through a procurement process, which is a process that's in place. It's been in place when the previous government was in government as well. And our priority as a government is growing our economy and creating jobs. And that's providing opportunities for people in New Brunswick. And we continue to do that. And that's why we're investing record amounts in infrastructure. I can tell the member opposite, I've been to many of their ridings making announcements over the past several weeks, and get ready. I'm coming back next week once the House adjourns. We've got announcements in ridings all over New Brunswick about the significant investments that we're making, particularly, I would say, in rural New Brunswick, because rural New Brunswick is an important part of our province, and we're going to continue to make those investments. A lot of the investments we're making, Mr. Speaker, are in partnership with the Trudeau government federally, who also believes in investing in infrastructure. Unfortunately, the Leader of the Opposition doesn't.
Member for New Maryland Sunbury.
Mr. Speaker, you can spend all the money you want. You can spend all the money in every bank in the province. But if you're not protecting the people that want the jobs, that can undertake these contracts right here in New Brunswick, it's all for naught. If you're letting that tax dollar, if you're allowing that revenue to leave the province to outside companies, you're not protecting New Brunswickers, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've seen the Premier allow PCS to leave the province, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've seen the project at the Campbellton Hospital go to a Quebec company, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the failed snowplow contract was a Quebec company, Mr. Speaker, and now we're learning, Mr. Speaker, that the contract to renovate the George Dumont Hospital is also going to a Quebec company, Mr. Speaker, for a little bit of money that New Brunswick companies here in the province could use. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking the Premier today, what is he doing to protect New Brunswick companies?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Department of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the member opposite brought up particularly the contract for salt, because I'd refer the member opposite, and I know the member from Sussex had made comments, political comments, saying that we're playing politics and we're not helping his community. We've had an announcement in the village of Sussex for some major infrastructure work. In fact, that's one of the places I'll be back next week, and I'll be sure to invite the member from Sussex to join me in sharing good news with the community that he was elected to represent. I would refer the members opposite to an editorial in the Kings County Record where they say, don't blame the province of New Brunswick for salt being off the table. We had salt being mined in the province at one time. The Department of Transportation and Infrastructure was notified that they were not going to be mining salt no more. We did the responsible thing. We put out a tender. We had 5 bidders, and I can tell you, we've got a good dollar value for salt. And in the editorial, the Kings County Record, where the member from Sussex resides, had said he needs to stop playing politics with the salt contract.
Oh. Member for New Maryland Sunbury.
Mr. Speaker, it's pretty evident today that that the Premier isn't willing to stand up and tell New Brunswicker how he is protecting their jobs in this province, Mr. Speaker. Because not long after we started asking the questions on what he's doing, a year or 2 years ago, he tasked Susan Holt from his office to put together a procurement action plan, Mr. Speaker, something that the tradespeople in this province had a lot of input on, and they've been asking for these changes to protect themselves, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to read a little excerpt from the Premier's platform. giving New Brunswick companies a better chance to win government contracts by introducing industrial and regional benefits to procurement scoring. If he's done that yet, Mr. Speaker, I'd gladly like to hear about it. And I want to know the reason why the renovations for Dumont is going to a Quebec company when 2 local companies in New Brunswick were close to the bid and they didn't receive it. Millions of dollars in revenue are going to leave the province, Mr. Speaker. Premier, what are you going to do about it?
The Honourable Minister of Department of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I have to remind the member opposite that we're an export-driven province. And I think what he is saying would indicate he wants to put walls around our province. He might have the Trump attitude, but we certainly don't. We want to do business outside the province.
Yay!
And we want to help grow New Brunswick businesses, and we're working extremely hard to do that each and every day, Mr. Speaker. We're an export-driven province. We have companies that I've met with on a weekly basis around the province who are doing tremendous, tremendous things, and they're getting business all over North America, all over the world, Mr. Speaker. And if we take the attitude that the member opposite is talking about, he wants to build a wall around the province so that we won't be able to do work outside of the province and contain everything within. And I could say that's not the path that we're taking, Mr. Speaker. New Brunswick is open for business, and we're going to continue to work with our small entrepreneurs, and we're going to continue to make investments in rural New Brunswick.